My brioche dough has been in the fridge overnight and now it's ready to be divided and shaped into buns. The dough has become, well, it's very firm now from the fridge, but as you can see it's developed somewhat. It will continue to rise even in the cold of the fridge. It's just going to do it very slowly. So for a regular sized bun, I'm going to divide this into pieces of round about 75 grams. And this is very nice to cut and handle while it's still cold from the fridge. And by dividing it right now, it's going to warm up that much quicker. Okay, so I've got a scrap left there. I'll make a small bun with that. So all I'm going to do now is just fold the scraps of dough into the centre. I will come back and shape those again after they've warmed through just a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to leave them for about 10 minutes just to warm up a little bit before I complete the shaping of them. Okay, I've just let these warm up just a little bit for 10 minutes or so, and I'm going to shape those now. And I'm going to prove these on some parchment paper, and I will then slide this parchment paper straight into the oven when they're ready to bake. I've got a baking stone in the oven and I can slide this straight onto the baking stone. They'll cook very nicely on that. If you don't have a baking stone, then you can warm a heavy baking sheet in the oven ready for the buns. So I'm going to use a little flour on the worktop because these will be quite sticky. A little on the hands. And then just form these into the usual ball shape. Okay, so I'm going to put 5 of those on each piece, giving them plenty of room to expand in the oven. Yeah, now they've warmed up, it just lets this surface tighten up nicer than when they're so cold from the fridge. Okay, so I could just leave them like that, but these are very high and they're really going to rise up nicely in the oven. So what I'm going to do to each one of those, I'm just going to flatten out each bun. I don't normally do that with bread rolls, but with these I don't want them to have quite so much height. And they are going to rise up nicely. Okay, I'm going to repeat that process with the rest of the dough. Then I'm going to just cover these with a sheet of cling film and I'm going to leave those to rise. Now the dough is still cold, so it's probably going to take a good half an hour before these really get going, and then maybe they'll need an hour or an hour and a half to rise, but I'll keep an eye on that and I'll come back about half an hour before I think they need to go in the oven. So these buns have had about 50-55 minutes now, and you can see that they're starting to rise up. They're no longer as flat as I left them, and I think these could be ready for the oven in about half an hour or so. So right now I'm going to put the oven on to 185 degrees and let that warm the baking stone through, and in about half an hour I'll get the first batch in the oven. So these brioche buns have been proving now for about an hour and a half, and I think they're ready to get in the oven. They've warmed through, they're now soft and pillowy, and they've risen up quite a bit. What I want to do to these before I put them in the oven though is put a bit of an egg wash on. First I'll break the egg, give that a beat with the fork. I'm going to add a splash of milk to the egg wash. Okay, so now I'm just going to brush on this lovely egg wash over the surface. That's just going to give this a really nice, rich golden colour when it bakes. Now my oven is already heated to 185 degrees, and I can transfer these straight onto my baking stone. I've got a peel here which will help me do that. Now these are going to need roughly 20 minutes in the oven. Keep an eye on them, you don't want the tops to get too dark, but you want that nice rich brown crust on the top. After 20 minutes I'll take these out and I'll let them cool on a wire rack, and then I'll repeat for the rest of the batch. So I have some baked brioche buns just out of the oven, and I'm just going to very carefully place these on the rack to cool. Now the buns are very soft and delicate, and they want to be handled with some care. Now you can see why I flattened this dough just before proving it, because these really have risen up magnificently in the oven. One of the drawbacks of such a great rise is that some of these have some cracking on the surface. Now, to be honest, I really don't care about that. I'm much more interested in what's going on inside, and that rise is going to give that a beautiful light open texture inside, and you can smell just wonderful buttery brioche. Now, what I didn't mention before when I put these in the oven is that I have a tray in the bottom of the oven, and I add a good slug of water when I load these buns, and that generates steam, and that steam hopefully prevents this crust from forming up too soon. So as these start to rise, if that crust gets dry and sets, these really are going to burst quite badly. Now that steam tends to prevent that. Obviously that hasn't completely worked in all these cases. You can brush the surface with water, but to be honest, I'm pretty happy with those. One other thing is that I tend to bake when the dough is slightly underproofed. I err on the side of underproofed rather than risking overproofing the dough. If you overproof the dough, it can be a real disaster. The whole thing can collapse when you take it out of the oven. That leaves quite a pressure inside the bread, and that's what gives this magnificent rise in the oven. I don't plan on changing that. I think this rise is wonderful, and that's what's going to make it so light. So there's a few cosmetic cracks, and I'm pretty happy with that. That's going to be some good brioche. So I'll let those cool, and then they're ready to be eaten. There you have it, brioche buns.